That guy's super jacked. Do you know he was a competitive diver?
I did not know that.
He was a competitive diver before he got in the film, and before he got in acting, and he
All right, we're back. Episode 6 of Crosstalk. I'm Tim.
I'm Chris.
And today we're talking about something that Chris has.
Yeah, today we're talking about fandom and how it drives studio direction. I read an interesting article. We're going to talk about that in a second, but essentially, Twitter's a huge voice, for example, of current fandoms and how people can maybe drive studio decision. And direction of film and things like that, sometimes for good and sometimes with perhaps not so good results. So with that in mind, we'll get started. And so Tim, how do you feel about like modern day fandom, how it's kind of evolved, especially with social media now?
Yeah, so I have a really interesting perspective on it as an artist. I think that fandom is a really special thing. And I am a fan of certain things myself.
Absolutely.
And I am hoping to see the other side of that evolve over time too, and hopefully drive like my unique perspective on fandom. I think that social media is sort of a double-edged sword right now.
Yeah, exactly.
I think that it has its perks and it has its negatives, and I think that the article you alluded to, and you can introduce it, but the ideas that article brings up are really actually poignant, and they demonstrate it without addressing the root of the problem. They address the problem. And the problem, I think, is that you're going to have people who have very strong views no matter where you are in life, if you're young, old, what culture you're participating in, like pop culture or otherwise. And what social media does is it just allows everyone to have a stronger voice.
Yeah, absolutely. Like any tool, technology or otherwise, or you could compare it to a hammer even. It's a tool. It's neither inherently good or evil. It's how it's used in the application of said tool that makes the results end up go one way or the other, right?
Yeah.
I'll sort of address the elephant in the room, but the article, it's how fandom is dead, and it was written by Devin Faraci. He used to write for a website they used to go to, chud.com. Cinematic happenings under development. Right now he writes for Birth.Movies.Death, and that's where the article was posted. He makes a lot of interesting points about, and he uses the analogy of misery to talk about how if this person, because in that movie that person, she sees her favorite character killed off, and she takes it in her own hands to basically, it's certainly a crime of opportunity, but she kidnaps the author and forces him to write the story as she sees fit.
Right.
Now, it's almost like a movie that was ahead of its time, because you can make that physical embodiment of social media now. That's the double-edged sword you're talking about there, right? You can have like quite a bit of good come from it because you can have people having their voices heard, right?
But on the other side of the coin, you get bullies and trolls and extremists, people who, and that's the problem, is that it's hard to identify who the extremists are sometimes.
Sometimes, yeah.
But people who are on there just to stir the pot.
Yeah.
And then, the reality is, and this is where I think I can provide a unique perspective as an artist, but the reality is like, these are people too. Like, we get this idea in our heads that like a director is, because they're making millions of dollars or whatever, like
right.
they're sitting in an ivory tower. But the reality is that, they're just a success story. They are a person just like you and I, and they started somewhere, and they've just happened to gain success through fruits of their labor and opportunity and things like that, right?
Yeah.
But when we go to those artists and we tell them, yeah, you're a terrible person, you created something that I loved, you took something that I loved and you made it awful, and why would you do that to me? And you marginalized me, and you made me not believe in this character or idea anymore. And the problem with that is that the artist isn't obligated to create art for you.
That's right.
The artist creates art and puts it out into the world, and then it becomes part of culture and part of life.
That's right.
But it is never, ever the artist's responsibility to create something expressly the way that person or persons see.
Yeah, I would absolutely agree with that. And mind you, as you've alluded to before, you can't, as an artist, you probably can't work in a vacuum either. Like
No.
something like that could help you. And I've actually we talked about before we started filming recording. We talked about Simon Pegg, how he sort of hit some writer's block when he was writing the script for Star Trek Beyond.
Yeah.
He reached out to the fan community and they really helped him get past that. So.
Yeah.
And that's another good way, and that's an artist interacting with the fandom in a very positive manner, right?
Yeah, exactly.
I think a huge part of the problem too is lack of objectivity. Like people get so entwined, and they make it part of the personal identity that when somebody does a different adaptation, good or bad, that person that's not Star Trek, that's not Captain America, that's not
the Fantastic Four,
or whatever I grew up watching, so you're insulting me personally.
Yeah, Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles. Like, geez, like there's so many examples now.
There are, and look, for myself, I am a huge Star Trek fan. I would say I like Star Trek more than like Star Wars. Always have, even though Star Wars was my first exposure to science fiction.
Yeah,
the new Star Trek came out. The first one I found entertaining but full of holes.
Yeah.
The second one I can't stand. I've gone over that. The distinct difference between myself and maybe some other Star Trek fans, especially some old school ones, I don't like J.J. Abrams as a director at all. Like even in Star Wars, while I overall enjoyed it, I felt like a lot of the bad points for that film were a result of his direction.
Yeah.
But I would never go on Twitter and say you are the worst person ever. Like I hate I hate you. I hate your
art. You should die in a fire.
Yeah, exactly. Objectively, I don't like his work.
Yeah. So, speaking of fan theories and threatening people or objectivity in film, so we chatted about this very briefly, and I didn't say it when we were preliminary talking about this, but I had this idea that I was reminded of. So, remember when we went off the Star Wars movie, the new Star Wars, and there was all these rumors running around about who Commander Snoke was. Do you remember that?
Yeah.
Of course you do.
Yes.
So, there's this theory out there that was pretty popular, or at least I was like a champion for it, of Jar Jar Binks.
I know, it would have been really cool, but I'm like, there's no way they're doing that.
Okay, so the reason why that is both a good thing and a bad thing is it's good because it exposes a problem with fandom.
Yeah.
And the reason why it's a bad thing is that it is sort of like stunted growth on the part of...
Exposes a problem with fandom. I mean, no, fan theories are interesting insofar as like you can get a lot of engagement with it, and you can have some interesting conversations about speculating, right?
Yes.
Like you said, how it's bad is basically the reason you said. I mean, it can be very trapping, right?
Yes.
Or it can set your expectation to a certain point where they can't possibly meet it.
Right. So the reason why I liked The Force Awakens and why I personally had an awakening after I watched the movie was because I realized something. I realized that it's okay to like the original trilogy and it's okay to like the prequel movies.
No, I'm just kidding.
But the reason why people don't, and the reason why fan theories are a problem, is because in your heart, you're like, I want to justify why these movies are bad movies, and you come up with a reason to make them good. And yeah, it would be really cool if George Lucas had this long game that redeemed those three movies, but it probably won't ever do that.
No, it won't.
And even if it did, like, they are empirically badly made. Like, they're not good...
Yeah.
Like, conceptually, that would be cool, but they would still be badly made movies.
Yeah, George Lucas is a director that, and what ended up making the original trilogy so good, he needs somebody to rein him in, and it never happened in the prequels.
But back to your original point where you're talking about Star Trek, which is what sparked that reminder for me about the Star Trek, or Star Wars thing.
Right.
Which is, you can love the original Star Trek movies, or specific ones, and then they make new ones, and you don't like those particular adaptations, but now you've sort of helped increase the fold of Star Trek fans, right?
Yeah.
By being a good ambassador for the Star Trek brand.
Yeah.
And not shitting all over it and saying, oh, I didn't like Into Darkness, so obviously Star Trek is ruined, screw Star Trek, I don't want to be around Star Trek, da-da-da-da. You said, no, I still like Star Trek. I just don't like those two movies because
and I have my reasons, and I state them, and people can agree or disagree, and we can go. Everybody can go about their lives.
Right. So that's why I brought up the Jar Jar Binks thing, because I like certain parts of the prequel movies, but people don't. And it was a thing in my mind as someone who's a theorist and loves theories and is an artist. I wanted to believe that was a good thing.
To the theory part,
yes,
there are, like, I mean, and how could social media and stuff like that can affect another negative aspect would be, and you take TV as an example, like Game of Thrones.
Yes.
People will theorize and oftentimes, like, hit the nail on the head before they ever get to the episode, and so maybe it loses its impact.
Yes.
So it's very. I read somebody again, Chud, the website they go to, they review every episode, and they talked in one of the reviews about how difficult it is now to engineer a truly surprising moment. And you almost have to, for a big reveal, you almost have to answer a question that people aren't asking.
That's right.
Like, so a good example that if you don't know the spoilers of this, then you're under a rock. Like the whole Luke's dad. Like, so like, Darth Vader being Luke's father, right? Nobody asked that question. Like, nobody asked who his parents were, and that's people, because I've heard that, like, in relation to Star Wars, like the difference between, like, it's like, who's Rey's parents? Who's Rey's parents?
Yeah,
like the
that's
whole,
not
they pound your head over the head with it, right? The whole movie. But with just figured, his dad died. Like, it never occurred to anybody that might be, like, not the truth.
Yeah.
And nobody ever asked, like, who his dad really was, because it's like, it's sort of to the side and doesn't really affect what's going on. But then it totally changed everything about the trilogy. So
so, like, if I were to theorize off that idea, off of what you just said, what would be a cool one would be, like, maybe something around Kylo Ren, because like, we're not thinking about him as a character. We just assume he's bad. We know who his parents are. We know that he worked as a student for Luke Skywalker.
That's right.
But, like, that's where people aren't looking. So, like, that could be a good misdirection for the plot.
Right. Yeah.
So, to your point, yes, the tilt is always the best when it's exactly that, tilt.
Yeah.
The movie Scream is a really good example of a tilt that not only celebrates fandom, but is, like, completely unexpected, right?
Yeah, my two things about that film.
Yes.
Two things. Number one, I find it very interesting that the gigantic movie buffs were insane, murderous villains.
Yeah.
And number two, I find it also very funny that the survivor girl, who knows all the rules, ultimately ends up breaking them all.
That's right.
Yeah,
which is why it's a great movie.
So it's not only is it a very effective horror movie, period, as entertaining and funny and all that stuff, but and it's very meta. But then there's even another layer where you're like, there's even another sub message that Craven was sort of weaving into the film too. So it's, that's what makes it so good, right?
Yes.
Yeah. So that's a great example. As we were talking before too, I brought up Jane Silent Bob Strike Back.
Yes.
It's ridiculously silly comedy. It's very, it's dirty and it's very, like, I wouldn't exactly call it intelligent comedy at all.
Yeah.
But it's funny and it's very enjoyable from the perspective of this is about 2001 or so. So the whole premise of the movie is they end up going to Hollywood. The comic book that was based on him in a previous movie that they established was getting made into adapted into film.
Yeah.
And back when the internet was sort of new then, it was all chat rooms and fandom was like very like a subsection of fans, like very like stereotypical, live in their mom's basement, like very nerdy kind of people who. So I found that. If that's not your cup of tea, maybe you haven't seen it, but if you get through if you get past the laughter, you get to that sort of subtextual message about fandom in general, about how it was sort of trending that way then.
Yeah.
And the most hilarious part too at the end is when it was when all the money they make off the movie deal, they end up flying to every location of every person that that made fun of them on the chat boards, and they beat the crap out of all of them.
We're in a point now where comic books, which are like for the uneducated, like comic books are like a perpetually dying industry. Like they've never been money makers.
Yeah.
There were bubbles on speculation because people who had lots of money thought that there was money in comic books, and little did they know that comic books don't make money. Like the only reason why those comic books were valuable is because they were out of print.
It's like anything else as a collector's item, it's like a hockey card or an antique.
But that doesn't make
cabinet.
them inherently valuable.
That's right.
So we're starting to see, as comic book fans, we're starting to see comic book movies made that are actually legitimately good movies.
Yeah, with A-list actors and A-list directors and studio backing and some with studio interference and some maybe some with not.
But we're in a bubble right now, I would say.
Yeah.
We're definitely in a comic book movie bubble. And it's going to burst at some point.
Bubbles burst? Oh, wait, direct Simpsons quote? Bubbles burst? Yeah.
And I think that there's a way to ease that bursting, and it requires a little bit of empathy on the part of fans and a little bit of empathy on the part of the studios and the directors and all the people who make the decisions about the movies.
Yeah, absolutely.
Which is why it's so interesting, because we were talking about this before the video started, but we were talking about Captain America, and like, because you had got the haircut, so like, because I know you're a big Captain America fan.
Huge, yes.
I knew about the Captain America #1 issue coming out, like the day it came out, because I'm on Twitter, and like I'm always seeing weird stuff on the internet now that I'm perpetually on the internet.
Yeah.
And to your point, or your earlier point, like people blew up. People got really up in arms about Captain America.
Very upset.
And if you don't know what I'm talking about, and I know you do, Chris, but I'll just say it so for everyone who doesn't know, Captain America was recently revealed to be an agent of Hydra. And all the people at Marvel said that it was
a double agent the whole time.
It was not mind control, it was not alternate universe, it was not brainwashing, none of that. But the point is that the people who create those comic books create them because they love those stories and they love what those stories represent, which is, morality tales and satire and all these things that are part of art. And because comic books are art, right?
Yeah, absolutely.
The problem is that people get upset and they think that because they consume this stuff, that they have every right to dictate to the artists who Captain America is. Yeah. And that is not true.
It's art for profit, right?
Right.
Like, and that's the goal. It's not art for art. It's not art for creative.
Yeah.
Though there are creative parts to it, and I'm sure the directors and scriptwriters, they will inject their own creativity into it, but at the end of the day, the Marvel Disney juggernaut is there to make billions. That's what it's for.
Yeah. They'll tell good stories, but not at the expense of like the death of the industry.
Exactly.
Right?
Yeah, they won't tell. As much as you might enjoy a high stakes where they kill off several characters, they're probably not going to do that. If anything, they'll expand their current lineup, and they'll just start transitioning away from the original core team. That's what they'll do. You have to take these kinds of things in consideration. As far as the comic book goes, again, like, maybe that's not how I define Steve Rogers as, but again, as we were talking about before we started recording, I'm certainly not going to threaten anybody, but I guarantee you, especially with comic books, somebody, as they did with Superior Spider-Man when they kill off Peter Parker and had Doc Ock take over his body, that's not going to last.
Characters evolve, characters change, characters are adapted. We talked about adaptations, but like things can't stay the same in order to remain interesting. It's
exactly. Now, so it can drive positively, negatively. It's 'cause sometimes studios ignore it, and sometimes they play into it now.
Yeah.
The case of the Fantastic Four, recent movie, it's like an incoherent mess. Mm-hmm. And why is it? Because at the beginning, Josh Trank started out with his own idea for the movie. It was going to be completely different than what the finished product ended up being. Yeah. And Sony got cold feet, and they feared the social media backlash.
Yeah.
And they stepped in and completely changed it. And then they ended up with the social media backlash anyway, because it was an incoherent mess.
Yeah.
So driving studio direction that way too, through your voice, like even the fear of it sometimes can be a crippling thing, right?
Yeah, and it doesn't mean that the actors are bad actors, or they can't portray comic book characters, or that that directors shouldn't make comic book movies ever again. Like, no, sometimes there's circumstances beyond your control.
Yeah.
Like, if we look at Ryan Reynolds, do you think that Ryan Reynolds should never play a comic book hero? No, it's 2016. He just played Deadpool and was awesome.
And he was excellent at it.
Right?
Exactly.
So there's 2 bad movies that he was a part of, but that doesn't mean he's a bad actor. It just means that he needed a particular direction.
Yeah, don't insult the person. Don't threaten the person. Don't say that they should never work because you don't like their work. Like, there's plenty of people that like his work.
Yeah.
So it's,
So, yeah, I think that's like a really good point.
Yeah.
And I think we've covered everything off.
Yeah.
Do you think?
So,
Yeah.
Do you think we covered all the topics? Maybe some more examples of film that you think really conveys maybe the role of fandom in film, or any maybe more opinions on social media. Maybe you've had some good or bad experiences. Feel free to comment below the video, like the video, and even better, subscribe to the channel.
Till next time, I'm Tim.
And I'm Chris.
And this is Crosstalk.